The Waters of Oblivion. 2 years after the mutiny, John Hughes, a young captain of infantry, was stationed at Meerut. This man knew many tongues and loved to wrestle with dialects. One hot day in the bazaar, he entered a bookshop and among piles of trash fell upon a thin pamphlet. It was stitched between purple paper covers, and as he soon made out, was a manuscript in Pali. Now Pali is a tongue which few white men understand. It delighted the captain, who paid a trifle and put the leaves in his pocket. He dined at the mess. Returning late that night to his quarters, he found the book on his table where his servant had laid it. He made himself comfortable, lighted a cheroot, and took up the pamphlet. Yes, it was written with care in Pali, of which he knew something. He remembered that a certain reverend, a mission priest, had made a full vocabulary of this tongue. He got up and after some search found it, and sat down again to enjoy the pleasing exasperations of a language of which he knew enough to be preassured of the difficulties it presented. But first he looked the little book over. The covers, of a purple which was unlike other purples, were faded, worn, and frayed. Usually these second-hand bazaar books had queer smells by which their past might be guessed. The little purple manuscript had a faint fragrance, which vainly taxed his remembrance for the place where he had known it. As he ran over the pages, he saw that someone had made marginal comments of small importance. At the end of the book were written 4 lines, in a very minute English script, and, as he concluded, by a woman's hand. The ink had faded, and it was so hard to read by candlelight that he gave up the effort, thinking that it would be easier to make out by day. The book was his real attraction. He settled himself for a bout with its meanings, as eager as a traveler in a strange land. On the inside of the front cover was written in a large masculine hand, "This book was once a man." The phrase pleased him. "I like that," he said aloud. "That ought to be put over the door of a library." He wondered if it were a quotation or if the reading of the manuscript had prompted it. He looked around the room. There were books everywhere, on chair and table, a few in his own language, the greater books, and many in the tongues of the East. Some were native manuscripts. He felt for a time as though the room were spirit-haunted. A dreamy pleasure in the thought kept his fancy busy for a while, and he said aloud, "Yes, every book was once a man." At last he returned to the purple-tinted little volume, saying to himself, "So 2 other English people have handled and perhaps read it." That alone gave the script unusual interest, for few of his own race read Pali. It began thus: "I, Abdallah, a man of Ceylon, on the 9th day of the 7th moon, being now in my 31st year, here set down certain things for my own remembrance. I shall write of my search for the Well of the Waters of Forgetfulness. I am assured by the wise Munshi, Salak Bey, that in them a man may wash away remembrance, and be as the dead who are born again, without memories of the life they have lost. Thus shall I cease to know that in anger I slew him I loved best, my father's son." "By George," said the captain, "what a queer find." He sat a little while with the booklet open on his knee. Had it been written in English, and had he been in his own land, he would have smiled at this dreamer or mystic. But the East is the East, and he had lived much among its people. He returned to the pages and slowly and painfully made out their meaning, finding it even harder because of being in written characters. There were in all, or had been, as he counted, 63 pages. 2 were missing in part, as he saw by the torn remainders. For the most part, it was a record of distances traveled, of visits to noted temples, and of vast footsore wanderings. Here and there were bits of more personal reflection. Over these the captain paused, being a man of imaginative turn, and able to enter sympathetically into the ways of the native mind. "Ah!" he exclaimed, as he made clear to himself this passage. "If I find what I seek and so lose remembrance of all that has been, whither will have gone the thoughts of my life? Shall I never meet them again? Surely. The thoughts of a man do not die, but are fragments of the eternal mind, and go hence whither they came, being as children that are born, and dying live again elsewhere. A little further he read, If I lose all memory and have release from the hell of seeing the dead always at my feet, in his blood, I shall forget too my wife and my son. I must decide to keep my anguish and my love, or to part with both. I have made my choice. Again he read, I have lost by my own act a man dear to me. I have both the grief and the sin. Long have I wandered in the land of sorrow. There every man is alone, and there is no language, for in the land of sorrow there is but one inhabitant. Great Buddha, but that is all pretty grim, said the reader, and went on with rapt attention. As he read, the manuscript became harder to decipher, the ink paler, the letters ill-formed, blurred, or giving signs of tremor. At last he came on a date and knew that the writer must have been many years wandering. A man in the vigor of life wrote the first lines. It was an old man who wrote the last. Clearly insane from remorse, thought the captain. It was now far into the night, but still the indistinct pages held him, as he read on, finding now and then that words he should have known well obliged him to pause and search for elusive meanings. He concluded at length that his brain was tired, and had the uncertainty of action which overtired muscles exhibit. He reluctantly laid aside the little book and undressed. When ready for bed, his curiosity prevailing, he took it up again, reading with increase of difficulty. Near the close he found this passage, which at once reassured his reason as to the unhappy writer's delusion. At last I knew at morning that it was near, and now at evening I have found the valley, and the 7 red stones as the Munshi described them. I am here, where the years and long travel have brought me. The vale slopes sharply and is clad with bamboos, a path winds among them, and here is that I seek. An abounding spring rises up in vast flow, and must return whither it came, for it has no outlet. The earth continually takes back what it gave. This is as I was told, the well of the Waters of Forgetfulness. Here I have sat long in thought. At last I take out my pen and write. Soon all the past will fade by degrees, and never after shall I know it. Even what I write will be as if it were the story of what another wrote. My brother will be avenged, even in my relief, because I shall no more see those I love, or know them as my own. I sit here in the shadows and think on what has been and what will be. I shall feel the world of memories fading like a tablet that is cleansed. It will come slowly. I shall feel the joy of forgetting. I have washed in the spring and wondered. It is not like the waters of earth. It does not wet the hand or head, but it is as if a cool wind went over them. And now I dip it in my garments and write in haste, being aware that all my past life is growing dim to me. Let my latest words be of thanks. Here followed a few lines, under which the hand of a woman had written the words which the reader had observed on his first look at the manuscript. He was now too eager to wait. He found a magnifying glass, and then easily read this rendering of the final lines. By the waters of oblivion, I sat down and wept. By the waters of oblivion, life slumbered and slept. Then she had added, would that I also could find them, or forgiveness. Again the captain sat quiet in thought, wondering who and what the woman was. The strangeness of this wild story held him, and he smiled at the feeling of how near he was to accepting it as true. But he had felt before the spell of the Eastern world. At last he rose and looked about him. He had a baffling sensation of everything in the room being remote from him, and of a little trouble in recalling something to which he was to attend next day. He dismissed it, acknowledging anew the scholar's experience of the effect of mental tension, which had gone far beyond the mere needs of the translation. He went to bed and lay a long while thinking about the man's madness and seeing the gaunt white figure in the bamboo grove bending over what he believed to be the Waters of Oblivion. Then he slept. At morning his servant awakened him and said,
"The bath is ready. The sahib's garments are here. The sahib was hard to waken and he will be late for parade."
The young man sat up and said, "Who are you? Where am I?" The man repeated his statement as Hughes got out of bed. The servant left him. Hughes said long afterwards when he told me this tale, "I sat down and tried to recall something which I had not done the night before. I could not. I found the room unusual, rather than altogether new. I forgot the parade, and began to look at this and that. I was like a ship in a fog, which now clears, and leaves only a thin mist, and then isolates the ship in gray aloofness. I remembered that I must clap my hands when I wanted something. I did so. My man came back. I asked, 'What are these for?' Pointing to my equipments. He said, 'The Captain Sahib's uniform.' I took up a photograph and asked who it was. It seemed to me a beautiful woman.
'Great Allah, it is the lady the Captain Sahib will marry.'
I laughed and said inanely, I don't remember. On this the man fled. I recalled nothing else, but they said I slept 2 days. An ass of a doctor declared I had had sunstroke. It was nonsense. I was up the 3rd day and as fit as anybody. However, something was wrong with me. I think that now I know very well what it was. I was a month at Simla before I entirely recovered my memory, and to this day the photograph of my wife has, now and then, that curious look of far-awayness I'd felt about things in my room. Soon after our marriage, I told my wife this rather queer story. The next day, she burned the book, and as she told me, did not even open it, which I thought wise, interesting, and unusual. As for the sunstroke, that is bosh, and India is a very bewildering country." End of section 4.